Before the start of this video, if you are looking for any of these singles that I talk about today, make sure to check out my TCG Player affiliate link down below in the description. And by clicking on that link, and when you shop for those singles, I do get a small bonus. Another way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron member. There are some great benefits, as you can have your name on each video, you do have early access to videos, giveaways, deck advice and upgrades, and much more when you do join. And if anything else, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That definitely goes a long way in supporting the channel. Hey, how's it going YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG, and in today's video I wanted to talk about a commander that not a lot of people are talking about in the new Aether Drift set. A lot of people are talking about Hashiton or even Captain Howler, but I haven't seen a lot of people talk about Mendicant Core Guidelight, and I will be honest, I haven't too much either. But the more I dug into this commander and the more I brewed around him, the more I realized this commander is truly a nightmare to deal with. I made an artifact deck a little while ago with Iron Man, but I found that he was pretty consistent and the deck plan was pretty linear, and plus I wanted to switch to an Azorius commander deck. This is one I might build myself. We'll see what goes on in the future. I tend to build decks about a month or two after the sets have been released so that I can have a clearer mind and not really have any recency bias, because I will be honest, I had a lot of recency bias towards a lot of these commanders, or even in commanders in past, and then I built them and then like a week or two later I decided to scrap them. So this is one I might consider building. I'm gonna wait till the new sets come out, then I might look at this commander, but I love the art, and I think this is the first robot in the official Magic the Gathering set. I know there's plenty of others that are in Universes Beyond, but specifically Magic the Gathering, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first robot. Besides that point, this is an incredible commander, and to kind of give you an overview of this deck tech, I'm first going to focus on some artifact synergies with your commander, focus on artifact payoffs, and talk about win cons. And so now with that said, let's get started. Let's talk about this commander. So reading into Mendicant, for 1 in blue, yes, it's only 2 mana, which is pretty cheap and efficient. It's a legendary artifact creature, robot. Its power is equal to the number of artifacts you control, so this in a way kind of feels like a Urza construct, or should I say construct in a way. But it does have the new ability, Start Your Engines. If you have no speed, it starts at 1. It increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life. The max speed is 4. And something to note about this that not a lot of people realize, when this enters the battlefield, your speed will automatically start at 1. And then in that same turn, if you swing in for combat damage and opponent loses life, your speed will go to 2 automatically, and you'll want to make sure it gets to that max speed ability so that you can get more benefits out of your artifacts when you cast them. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1 mana. If you do, you copy it. And it might seem like a lot to get that max speed. In a weird way, this kind of feels like an aggressive Azorius strategy, which honestly I think is really cool. I feel like with Azorius, it's known for colors of control. However, in this deck, you want to be aggressive as possible so that way you can get that max speed and copy your artifact spells to overwhelm your opponents. So now that I've talked about the commander, let's talk about supporter cards of the deck. So first things first, you definitely want card draw in the deck. This is most vital because of course our commander is not a card draw outlet in the command zone, so we want as much of these effects as possible. Since this is a little bit more aggressive, smashing robots at our opponents, we can get some card draw out of that. One that does come to mind is Thopter Spy Network. This is incredible because at the beginning of our upkeep, if we control an artifact, we make a Thopter on the battlefield. Not only that, if one of our artifact creatures connect with one of our opponents, we get to draw a card, and because we're making Thopters that are flying in the air that could swing in, most likely we could get some extra card advantage out of that. Another incredible option would be Biden the Thassa, or really any of those coastal piracy effects, where whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. Most likely we're swarming the battlefield with a lot of artifact creatures. We can get that extra advantage. Again, this is a very aggressive Azorius build. We want to get as much card draw as we can. But of course, if we are playing artifacts and we are an Azorius color combination, one of the best card draw options is Esper Sentinel, without a doubt. Not only that, it is flavorful because it's an artifact creature. This will help boost our commander's power, along with getting his card advantage when people cast their non-creature spells. And depending on some situations, Lost Shield Clockwork Scholar could be a great fit for us. Again, we are in that aggressive theme. We don't want to lose artifact creatures. We can prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures we control. But not only that, whenever one of our artifacts enter the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. Obviously, this will only trigger once each turn, but that's okay. We'll get that incidental card advantage here and there. So I talked a little bit about card advantage. There is also some removal options, specifically that deals with artifacts that I wanted to focus on, like Dispatch. This is just a essentially another Swords to Plowshares. For 1 white mana, you tap target creature, but if you control 3 artifacts, you exile that creature instead. So that's perfect, and it doesn't have the downside of giving your opponent's life gain. And if you do want a decent board wipe, Organic Extinction is incredible. It does have the improvise ability. This could potentially just cost 2 white mana depending on how much artifacts you have on the battlefield, and you destroy all non-artifact creatures, which most likely a lot of people may be playing some artifact creatures here and there, but not a lot. Most likely you're going to benefit out of this way more than your opponents would. Another card I would like to highlight that is an artifact, so it does work with our synergy, is Portal to Phyrexia. This is almost like a game closer in a way, but it could be a great board wipe for our opponents. Obviously, if they have more than 3 creatures, then it's not so much of a board wipe. When this card enters the battlefield, each opponent has to sacrifice 3 creatures, which can be backbreaking for a lot of different opponents. And then if Portal to Phyrexia makes it to your next turn, which most likely it wouldn't because a lot of people have the removal ready for Portal to Phyrexia, at least in my experience, you could reanimate a creature from a graveyard to the battlefield. And most likely you're going to find some creatures because each opponent sacrificed 3 creatures. So either way, this is going to be a win-win for us. But I would say one of my favorite removal pieces that are actually from the recent set is Riptide Gearhulk. This can be a potential finisher, but I wanted to focus on this because of this great ETB. It has double strike and prowess. We have a lot of non-creature spells, so this could get absolutely huge. When this creature enters, for each opponent, that's right, each opponent, not just one specific player, put up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls into its owner's library, third from the top. So this can be pretty brutal, especially if you have some blink spells. I didn't put a focus on blink spells in this deck specifically, but either way, this is great because it can remove any non-land permanent and put it into their deck. And if they forgot they had a fetch land they needed to sacrifice to search for a land, oh well, that card is going to be lost in their deck permanently until they draw it again. So I think this is going to be an excellent card, no question about it. So now that I focus on some cards that work well with our commander and will really help our game plan, I want to focus on flooding the board with a lot of tokens on the battlefield, so that way we could go into that aggressive game plan. So when going wide with a lot of artifact tokens, of course you need token doublers like Mondrak Glory Dominus or Anointed Procession. You could use other cards like Ultek Matter Weaver, which is just incredible in this deck. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you choose one, you make a gnome artifact creature token on the battlefield, or you create a token that's a copy of target artifact token you control. And all for 3 mana, that's what I call absolute value. This last ability is so efficient with our commander because if we do have max speed, we could copy an artifact spell, and if it's an artifact creature, we get to put it onto the battlefield, and then later on we could copy that artifact creature with Ultek's ability. And speaking of gnomes, Illustrious Wanderglyph is actually the reason why I've been tempted to make this commander, because for such a long time I actually opened this card and I wanted to put it into a deck, but I haven't found the right type of deck for it. But I do feel like this would be the perfect deck for it, because other artifact creatures you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. This is going to increase the power and toughness of our artifact creatures, and at the beginning of each upkeep you create a 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature token. So this is helping us widen the board, all the while buffing up our creatures. And within that same set of Lost Caverns of Ixalan, Thousand Moon Smithy is another great option. We can make a Gnome Soldier artifact creature token, and its power and toughness are each equal to the creatures and artifacts we control on the battlefield. And it's very easy to transform this because at the beginning of the pre-combat main phase, we could tap 5 untapped artifacts or creatures we control and transform it into Barox of the Thousand. And whenever we cast an artifact or creature spell by using mana produced by this, we get to essentially make another one of those Gnome artifact soldier creature tokens. So this will help us make a bigger and bigger board over time. And there are ways we can protect our artifact creatures on the battlefield because we want to make sure that none of them are susceptible to removal. Padim Console of Innovation is a great choice because artifacts you control have hexproof, and we can get some incidental card advantage. The same can be applied for Bronze Guardian. We could give ward to all our artifacts, and it can be a great beater on the battlefield, having double strike, and its power is equal to the number of artifacts we control. But by far the best option as far as artifacts go, if you really want to put a lot of artifact creatures on the battlefield, is none other than Simulacrum Synthesizer. This is one of my favorite cards. I actually made my Iron Man deck based off of this. Even though I scrapped that deck, I am tempted to make this deck and make it into a Simulacrum Synthesizer deck, because whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater enters the battlefield, we basically make a construct token with its power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts we control, which can get ridiculous. We have a lot of high mana artifacts in the deck that can be reduced basically off of affinity or other means. So this really could get out of hand, especially if we make a token copy of it with our commander, if we have max speed. And plus the tokens of the Simulacrum Synthesizer is incredible. I'll put it up on the screen just to show you how amazing the art looks. This one is a little bit more pricey, but trust me, it is worth it. It is really powerful and can really help you close out games. And speaking of closing out the game, I wanted to show you some options that'll help you out in that process. So if you have a huge army of artifact creatures on the battlefield, you'll probably want to make sure you give them some sort of evasion. Cyberdrive Awakener can help you close out the game because it has flying, and other artifact creatures you control have flying. But not only that, if you have a lot of non-creature artifacts on the battlefield, you can make them into 4/4s that you could swing in the air with your other artifact army. Another helpful option would be Masterful Replication. You could choose one, you can make 2 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature tokens, which if you're in the early game, then sure, but if you have 6 mana, you're most likely going to have a lot more artifact creatures on the battlefield because you want to choose that second ability if you have those constructs on the battlefield. Choose a target artifact you control. Each other artifact you control becomes a copy of that artifact until in a turn. Let's just say you have some artifact lands, some treasure tokens, and a lot of other things that are non-creatures on the battlefield. All those could be a copy of a specific artifact you control, like a construct, so that way you could swing for an immense amount of damage. In a similar way, I do love March of Progress. If you have a lot of artifact creatures on the battlefield, you could choose one target artifact or creature you control. For each artifact chosen this way, you create a token that's a copy of it, and on top of that, you could overload it by paying 6 and a blue, so that way you could just make an immense amount of tokens on the battlefield, and if you have a haste outlet, like a drawbridge, you can have them immediately swing. But if you do want some cards that straight up say, I win the game, Mechanized Production and Mirrored and Besieged can be great win cons. They're pretty slow. Mechanized Production, you get an enchanted artifact you control, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a token that's a copy of an enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as another, you win the game. This could essentially win you the game at the next upkeep, depending on if you have like 9 Thopters on the battlefield. All you have to do is make an extra Thopter, go to your next upkeep, and win. Another way to win the game would be using Mirrored and Besieged. You could use Mirror or Phyrexian, and if you want to win the game, most likely Phyrexian. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card, then discard a card. Then if there are 15 more artifacts in the graveyard, target opponent loses the game. And as the game goes on, most likely you're going to have a lot of artifacts in the graveyard, and if you have 15 or more, you can make an opponent lose the game one by one. But if I wanted to share with you the best artifact creature that you could put on the deck, it would be Cybermen Squadron. This is insanely cracked in this deck because non-legendary artifact creatures you control have Myriad. So each individual artifact creature, like a construct or a Thopter, will have Myriad. If you swing at one opponent, you'll make 2 token copies of that specific creature, swinging at the other 2 opponents. You will have to sacrifice them, but that's really not a big downside, especially if you have a huge army. This could really close out the game super fast. It's honestly very efficient, all for 7 mana. I know that seems like a lot, but in a way it feels like a Craterhoof Behemoth. I know it doesn't give an overrun ability, but when you have a lot of constructs on the battlefield, they're each going to get bigger by each one you make a token copy of. So if you're really good at math, not like me, I'm horrible at math, Cybermen Squadron can be a really good win con in the deck. So with all that said, that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Mendicant Core Guidelight. This is one powerful commander, very deceptively powerful because it's not really giving you any sort of card advantage. However, you are copying artifact spells when you get that max speed ability, and not only that, it's a big beater. It is surprising how much artifacts you can put on the battlefield and make this thing extra huge. It does have a 3 toughness, that's the only thing that's going against it, but again, I think this is extremely powerful. Let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts and opinions? Also, if you can, smash that like button and hit subscribe. That definitely goes a long way in supporting the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.